Oh, wow. Shalom, shalom, Mishpachah. This is Yerd Yao checking in. Um, hey. So we have, for this discussion, we have some comments with a person who RH negative herself, which is very, very interesting. Yesterday, we went over some of the ins and outs and some of the concerns concerning the RH negative factor in blood, and we kind of went over what that means. I don't think we went over specifically what it means, but I think we went over the implication as far as religiously yesterday. And I have to go ahead and unlock that video. I keep forgetting to unlock. Um, but what we discussed yesterday was, really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this particular topic, because it is really far reaching. And um, I'll have to go into some of the doctrines concerning this concept because because it is important. I've actually come across this concept before in another context. So the backstory and the doctrine that is created around it. Is it? Oh, thank you so much. And so, yes, Sarah, I do have daughters. Or was that Jen that said that? I do have daughters. This is my daughter right here. She brought me a hair tie. So give me one moment while I put my hair tie on. I hope y'all can't see me struggling over my head. All right, give me a second, you guys. I don't know if this is working or not, or if it's gonna work. Hair tie might not be big enough to get over my head. All right. Okay. Okay. Uh, if I'm on late, I am a little bit late here. I apologize. And then I don't know exactly how to set it up because I set it up for 6 a.m. American time, but that would be 10 a.m. here, and here I am, about 20 or so minutes late, 25 minutes late, and I don't know if I did it correctly. If I set it for 6 a.m. and that means 6 a.m. Africa time, or does that mean 6 a.m. American time? So I did it for American time, and so here it is, 10 o'clock in Africa. And I don't know if you guys have been waiting on me for a certain amount of time or not. But we're here, we're getting ready to go ahead and get into it. So there is what I wanted to really go into is why people say that this particular lack of a protein on your blood cell, and I wish Sarah was here so that she could answer some questions for me, because I do have questions, because it seems like this particular factor is associated with European people. So I want to ask, and I don't know if you can later on answer these questions, Sarah. I want to ask is, do you have blue eyes? Do you have blonde hair? Um, do you, because the research is coming up in some wild directions. In your family, do you have any, and it, you, of course, please use discretion on the information that you provide. But in your family, do you have any, types of genetic illnesses, or do you have any, you know, and I know this is going to sound strange, but do you have what people may consider to be, you know, extra abilities, maybe extra perception or a heightened sense of awareness? I don't know even how to describe it, but anything strange or that is uncommon to other people that don't have this particular factor, or that not don't have it but do have it, because you're the one that doesn't have it. And so if we can get into some of what the research has suggested. For one, what is very, very strange to me, and what rings to be true, is that if, okay, so when, from what the research shows, if a mother who is O negative or negative, I guess it wouldn't matter which other uh, uh, distinguished or uh, distinct of blood for the AABO, I don't think that would matter. But the negative aspect, if a mother was pregnant with a positive factor baby, that the baby would be in danger because the mother's O negative blood would see the positive blood. I keep saying O negative, but would see the positive blood and try to kill it like it's a foreign object. And this should not happen. It's almost as if two species are trying to mate and they can't. That something genetically is keeping them from mutating, from uh, procreating. I'm sorry, you guys. I stayed up pretty late last night, so I'm a little bit foggy. So this means that this particular blood is such a profound uh, mutation that it prohibits. And of course, there's a injection that you can take to overcome this, but it prohibits in a natural form two people from creating offspring together. And that's wild. That's a wild thing. And there's another thing that I wanted to talk about. It seems as if most U.S. presidents, I think it said 20 or 30 out of the 40, what is it, 7 now, 46, 45, something like that. But 25 to 30 out of the 40 some odd presidents that we've had in the United States have been Rh negative. And this is from a pool where there's only 15% of the population in America that does not have that particular factor. So it does appear that America, to rule this country, is choosing an inordinate amount of people with Rh negative factor, and that has to be important. The other thing is that it seems like a lot of celebrities are Rh negative. And so that's also important too, because we know that in these, satanic cults that exist in Hollywood, they are very, very concerned with blood. And I've even heard that before you can get into a party in some places, you have to provide a blood sample. Are they looking for this negative factor? Are they looking for, the thing that they have that, the rest of the world or the majority of the world does not have? And remember, yesterday we looked into where the populations were predominantly carrying this particular mutation, and they, of course, are from the Magog diaspora, into Norway and Sweden and Iceland and Greenland and all sorts of countries in Europe and Australia and America. And I say Magogite diaspora, but we know what it was. It wasn't a slave uh, dispersion. It was actually an invasion, right? We do know this in history that the Magogite clans invaded the rest of the world and then spread all over the world, right? And in a way that was, brutal and savage, in a way that was considered barbarian. And so if you look at the connection of you know, these two fact, you have a people group that has been, historically predatory, and then a large portion of that people group actually have, a mutation that is so different that it keeps procreation from happening between the two groups. And so those things together are significant because it almost seems like a secondary species that became predatory, or that is predatory against the other species. And I mean, it almost sounds like survival of the fittest. What Darwin um, predicted would happen in his book, um, The Descendant of Man. So if you guys are familiar with Charles Darwin and his theory of evolution, which we know to be in its core incorrect, because what evolution posits to be able to do is to identify the origin of seeds, right? And with his book, what was the first book? It's called Origin of Species. That first book was called Origin of Species and the Preservation of Favored Races. This is where the concept of eugenics comes from. That that really the goal of evolution is to preserve a favored race. From what he writes in another book called The Descent of Man, and anybody that has done the associated research with evolution will find this. He says that in the near future, the civilized races of mankind will most likely turn and destroy the uncivilized races of mankind, so that the European will be the next lowest creature to the European will no longer be what he calls the Negro and the Aborigine, which quote unquote are both Negro groups, but it will be the Caucasian and the monkey. So what he's saying is that the Caucasian, being at the higher end of the intelligence spectrum, being more evolved genetically than the humans around him, Negroes and Aborigines, is from what Darwin says, that the white man will then turn around and exterminate those lesser races, so that there will be a larger gap between the white man and the monkey, right? On this evolutionary scale here, this false evolutionary scale. Um, so we know that the origin is false, but what about the application, right? If let's just imagine if you are part of this seemingly predatory species, could you form a doctrine around your predatory behavior and the reason why that you behave predatory? Could you form a doctrine that actually promotes this behavior and encourages it on a scientific level? I believe that's what Darwin is doing. I believe he's encouraging the natural appetite for this particular group of people to behave in the way that they've been behaving, especially in the last um, 200 years since Charles Darwin, right? So we see um, the Rh negative people ruling in society. We see Rh negative people popular in society. And then we see Rh negative people predatory in society. And these are the things that we come up with at the end of the day. This is what the facts show, that from this group of people, there is some sort of profound difference. And so, doing research online, people with the Rh negative factor are claiming themselves that the factor comes from otherworldly origins. So the fact that procreation cannot happen without outside external help between these two groups, they've identified as being such a intrinsic mutation that must have come from a species that is, somehow appearing the same but different than other human beings. And because of that, they've gone on to conquer. And so, again, we have in the history of biblical understanding, concept of angels coming down and mating with human beings, and then giving birth to this offspring that is more than human. We have this story in the biblical record. We have this story in the Greek record. We have this story in the Roman record. We have this story in the Babylonian record. We have this story in the Sumerian record. We have this story in most records from most nations on the earth today. So if anything can be proven about the concept of whether or not angels can create a group of people on the earth, this should be one of the prime aspects of history that we incorporate fully into our understanding of what history is. You cannot look back in history and interpret it without fact in it. That at some point in time, according to the Bible, in history, entities that were non human emerged and were able to manifest themselves in a fleshly state and then come unto the women of society, impregnate them, and have them give birth to children, right? And these children were in the pre-flood world and the post-flood world, mutated and mutated to show specific characteristics from this mutation. In the old world, the characteristics that developed mutation were giantism. Do you see what I'm saying? That the babies be born grotesque and giant, right? So, so this means that in the old world, the reason why the old world was destroyed because of these types of genetic anomalies. That's one reason. It also says because the wickedness of mankind had exceeded what Elohim could put up with. Of course, then he brought the flood upon the world and destroyed all of mankind, including the ones that were of this mixed blood, right? And so after the flood, the scripture said this same thing happens again. And so it's a weird thing because we do see these people with this particular blood type, and we see that they are in control again in this era. And so let me go into the doctrines that I've seen that incorporate this blood type into their doctrine. And I don't really have a whole long time to go over this because my I forgot to charge my phone. My phone will be dying here in a minute. So I think I got to get off before it dies, or else the live won't save. Maybe, maybe not. We'll see. Um, so the doctrines that are surrounding this concept are really crazy. We talked about them, not so crazy, but but still worth mentioning because we've gotten into it before, and I didn't know exactly where or why these doctrines were coming up. But now I do. Now I can see this, and I do want to thank Jen L for sending me in this direction because this is a major um, component of the doctrine, right? And I've seen the doctrine before, but this component of the doctrine adds a little bit more. I guess you could say it makes it a little bit spicy. So the doctrine is and we talked about this before. The doctrine is the what is it? D. Brown or Doc Brown concept of the Da Vinci Code. Go into all of this. And what you guys, maybe you know this or maybe you don't, but this is today a doctrine that is found in Ku Klux Klan. When I say to you guys that the Ku Klux Klan is a radical European ver, subcategory of the Hebrew Israelites, I'm not playing about that. The Ku Klux Klan is a radical version, a radical European version of Hebrew Israelites. Let me show you why. So, so it's a book, Holy Grail. And what this goes into is this false history of the Messiah, Jesus, specifically Jesus, right? This comes from a Christian uh, context that Jesus having to to obey all the commands because he lived a sinless life, would um, then be, I'm sorry, I'm coming in there. I'll be off in a minute. Would then, out of necessity, need to have children because we are commanded to be fruitful and multiply. And so the doctrine comes from Jesus having to obey this command, and we don't see this command obeyed in the text. What people have said is if he lived a sinless life, he would have also had to have children. There's problems with this because people have lived a sinless life without having children, and the command is a command in terms of going forward with humanity, especially in the times of Genesis, especially in the times of Noah. These are the commands that are given to these specific people. Here later on in the text, we can argue whether or not that is a specific command that the Messiah had to follow to be sinless. But it's not one that I believe he had to follow in order to be sinless. Do you understand what I'm saying? When Moses brought down the commandments, it never says thou must have children in order to be considered righteous, right? And so just moving on from there, I don't want people to get confused about, maybe this is a commandment that he had to follow. But with this in mind, with this that other people believe, they say that he married his wife, he married Mary Magdalene, right? That Mary Magdalene wasn't just the disciples, right? That supported the ministry of Messiah, because she definitely was that. They also say that Mary Magdalene was the Messiah's wife and that they had children together. That the Mary, and I've heard this for a very long time. Like I said, this is a doctrine that is now very, very prominent, and it makes up the core of Ku Klux Klan Christianity. Um, and it's an Israelite doctrine that Europeans are the descendants of Israelites. So so then Jesus goes on to marry Mary Magdalene. The wedding in John chapter 2, the wedding at Canaan, John chapter 1, chapter 2. Supposedly, since we don't know who is being married and Messiah is there, Messiah's mother is there, they're saying that it's his wedding to Mary Magdalene in John, right? And then after the Messiah dies, his bloodline continues on in these European families, in Mary Magdalene, and I believe it's called the Merovingian dynasty, or don't get me to lying because I'm not absolutely sure about the name, but I do know they believe that the Messiah goes on to have children and that these children go on to become prominent members in society going forth and have created the kingly bloodline in Europe leading up to the present day. What they're saying is that the Rh negative factor is holy blood, is blood that comes from the Messiah himself, and indicate that the people that have this Rh negative factor are people that are related to Jesus. And that's the wild doctrine that finds its way into the Ku Klux Klan and in the turn of the last century, right? I actually went online and did some research on this a little while ago. We find that Ku Klux Klan Christians believe themselves to be the children of Israel, the lost tribes, the tribes of Judah, all of these from the tribe of Dan being Denmark for the Danes. Again, we discussed this before, that Dan is an ancient Semitic word that means judge, that there were a lot of Dans, that there was actually a lot of Daniel, as in Daniel. There was more than one. The Bible wasn't the only, the biblical Daniel wasn't the only Daniel in time. There was actually another Daniel named actually Daniel, who was also a very wise man and a very ancient man that predates the Daniel that we know, that is a Mesopotamian person instead of a Semitic person, from Israel, an Israelite person. So with that concept, we know that anybody, any tribe, anywhere, all over the world could be named Dan. We also know that the Europeans that we see today come from Magog, and then that group of people never did mix with Israelites anywhere in any significant fashion to then take over the bloodline and become now um, the lost tribes, right? So we know this doctrine to be false, but is there some truth in it? Because we know, all of us know that Jesus Christ is not the Messiah, right? That Jesus Christ is the anti-Messiah, the figure that's given the with the Magog, depiction, meaning that he must be the false Messiah. Now, does this false Messiah come to people in the way that he's been depicted? I believe so. Does this false Messiah, you know, maybe in the world come in the same way that in ancient times would have been significant for impregnating women, see what I'm saying, in these particular groups of people in order to have these genetic anomalies in it? I think that is happening. I think that's actually what is happening. And I do this group of people is predisposed to having supernatural powers, right? Because this is what we see. Part of the success of this group of people is supernatural. Does that make sense? I've seen some weird things online about the abilities, the capabilities that these particular people have. I'll be in there in a minute, and it blows your mind. There's even a suggestion that certain parasites that would infect, that would be in cats, that certain parasites would even work positively on this group of people and negatively on other people. I've heard that the COVID vaccine was worked positively for this group of people and negatively for the other group of people. All of these different things coming together to form a reality in the modern world that says that this group of people must be angelic in some sort of way. And I do believe that be the case. However, does that mean, and we talked about this yesterday, does that mean that they cannot be saved, right? That they cannot be a part of the kingdom of Elohim? I don't think that that's the case. I think that all people in all places are able to be in the kingdom of Elohim. Will it be difficult for a particular group of people or another? I think so, because I think genetically, the people that have this trait um, are predisposed to seek out some of these satanic um, uh, understandings in the world. Like every time I went to go do some research on this, people started pulling out tarot cards. I'm thinking, what is the connection here with tarot cards? In several videos that I watched on this subject, people started to, you know, get into witchcraft. Why is there a connection there? Because somehow, on a molecular level, on a blood level, these particular group of people are drawn to this understanding. And so I think to fight that aspect is hard. In the same way that a man, we talked about this yesterday, a man who is, predisposed to alcoholism, like if your father was an alcoholic, your father's father is an alcoholic, that now being able to drink and able to go out and drink would have to watch yourself because you could, very easily fall into alcoholism. So you being a believer and a person who is full of faith would have to then um, characterize your life. What's that? Yeah, 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 yeah. That, what Eliana wants it. Oh yeah, go ahead, go ahead. And you would have to watch, and you would have to be vigilant and proactive in your faith and in guarding your faith, because you would have you'd be predisposed to choosing this lifestyle, this outcome, this satanic outcome with the tarot cards and the witchcraft. So it would be important for you to guard your spirituality very, very closely. But besides that, the text says very specifically that people that were from the tribe of Scythia could be saved. We talked about this yesterday in Colossians chapter 3,